Hello, everybody. My name is Stephen D. Kelly. This is the Stephen D. Kelly Show. We are Truth Cat Radio, www.truthcatradio.com. Once again, it's Thursday. It's 81 degrees Fahrenheit. Outside, it's sunny. One day. It's now 6:01 p.m. It's June 20th, 2024, 6/20/2024. I noticed that this is like the day after Juneteenth, I think it is, Juneteenth. June 19th, but, it's easier to say Juneteenth. But the point is that Juneteenth is a holiday. It was actually, the banks were closed yesterday. It's a holiday over here. And it marks the occasion of when the slaves in Texas, at the end of the Civil War, finally got the word that slavery had been abolished and the Emancipation Proclamation, everybody was set free and all that. For whatever reason, I'm sure the plantation owners or whoever it was in Texas that was continuing this probably knew what was up, but for whatever reason, it took those people took 2 years, I believe it was, before the word got to them, and they were able to enjoy the same freedom as everybody else. Well, so I guess I want to dedicate this show in the spirit of that to the people, because I know that there's always going to be somebody out there that hasn't heard what's going on, that is yet to get the word, that needs to get the word. So even if it's something you would think would be obvious, or should be obvious, or everybody should know about, like Occupy the Getty. Now, I wanted to complain a little bit tonight. My original intention was to basically bitch about what's going on in Twitter and how very difficult it is to grow the audience and get the word out. I mean, I'm under some serious censorship right now. Serious censorship. First of all, they've removed the whole hashtag what's trending feature and replaced it with something that's 24/7 nonstop Zionist propaganda. Now, just to make things easy, I'm just going to, for the rest of the show, refer to that as the enemy. Now, you know who I'm talking about, Phoenicians, Satanists, whatever, but the enemy, the bad guys, the guys, our foes. Well, they make things rough, and I wanted to kind of perhaps, work with you guys to come up with some suggestions about how we should get back to the streets, do what we need to do, change our approach, whatever needs to be done in order to get around these newfound restrictions that we're getting from the Hasbara Ziobots, if you're, for lack of a better word. I mean, obviously, I noticed that my numbers have substantially decreased. And when I say numbers, I mean impressions on posts. It's going from thousands down to, a few hundred. The number of people joining the group, even though it's still people joining, I don't say the group is still growing, but the TikTok, seriously, one a day. I used to have 100 a day. Something funky going on. But rather than complain about that, because you all know who I'm going to say is responsible and what is ultimately responsible, I'd like to say that first, anything that's being done in the world, anything, including the things we're going to talk about tonight, are a result, a reaction of what we have done. I could say but I think you guys played such an important role and will continue to play such an important role that it's fair for me to say what we have done. Seriously. Go back in time. It becomes we pretty quick. Anyway, the point is that these guys are reactionary. They react. So they've come up with all sorts of schemes and players and narratives and this sort of thing to respond to what we've done. And you could say with a lot of certainty that all of the entire issue surrounding human trafficking, child sex trade, kidnapping, child kidnapping, human ritual abuse, all of this, all of that stuff, at least for the most part, we have caused that issue to become part of the narrative. Now, prior to 2012, of course, that didn't exist. We had a few people out there that were Kathy O'Brien was certainly a whistleblower for a long time, and she came out and talked about this stuff. But as far as tunnels and underground human trafficking and all of this nonsense, bunkers, everything that we have been pushing so hard now for at least 12 years, almost, going on 12 years, people, because of that, 3 presidential administrations worth of work, right? We are where we are now. So, unfortunately, we have to be a little more creative. But here's the thing. When I look at some of this propaganda, especially the stuff on Twitter, in fact, just for shits and giggles, I'm going to look in the page right now and see what it says. Okay. They've got this new section. I mean, first of all, they've got, Live on X, which is their live thing. They've got who to follow, a couple people you should click on. Then they've got this thing called Explore. Now, at the moment, this, propaganda is a little bit different than it is normally because there's events going on that we're going to talk about. The first one is Putin warns of Russian statehood end. Now, that's interesting because that's having to do with World War III, thing that we're really facing here tonight that we really want to talk about. Here's another one. This is more typical. Hamas holds 50 Israeli hostages. Okay, remember that. Hamas holds 50 Israeli hostages. Let me see. Melinda Gates endorses Biden, and RFK Jr. misses debate. No, he didn't miss a debate. What happened, he was not qualified because the polls that showed how popular he was were not accepted by the people at CNN that were doing the debate. So anyway, that's bullshit. But normally, a thing like this, I take copies. Here's what I see typically on any given moment. Netanyahu versus Biden, Paris teen gang rape, anti-Semitism under scrutiny, Hamas Gaza action under scrutiny, Congress approves $18 billion arms sale to Israel. Okay, now, remember, it's almost like there's nothing else happening in the world. But we get this. It's either Ukraine or Israel. Now, you wonder, why is it so bad? I mean, it's almost like it's not very subtle. And I would suggest that them having to do it this badly, this hard, this sledgehammer type of technique would suggest that they're very desperate. And more than likely, they're very afraid. And what are they afraid of? They are falling apart. Now, of course, I need to talk about the mafia, and I need to talk about the enemy, and I need to talk a little bit about the tunnels, and I need to talk about some of the players. I need to talk about what's going on right now concerning geopolitics. And I also need to talk about just how stupid the average American is, which is unfortunate because if we're getting into a World War III situation, it's not a good look. Let's just put it that way. But where do we start? Golly gee, obviously, the situation in Gaza is not good. There's not much left of the whatever you want to call it, territory, the open-air prison that hasn't been destroyed. I really don't know, but the bottom line is that they're trying to send these guys into Egypt or the Sinai. Now, I don't want to depart too much, but I'm just going to say right now, the whole purpose of sending these guys into the Sinai is that they want them to attack them from the Sinai to somehow, do something similar, launch missiles from the Sinai so that Israel can annex the Sinai. This is all part of the greater Israel thing. Just like they'd like to take, Damascus and parts of Jordan and big giant parts of Saudi Arabia. This is really what it's all about. So, but the thing is that this Khazarian mafia, this thing that really runs it, is really hurting in a big way. And that's mostly because of Ukraine. If you look at what the United States is doing as far as foreign policy is concerned, you'll see that nothing they do makes any sense. Everything seems suicidal. It's this hell-bent need to defend Ukraine. Now, last week, I guess it was the last few weeks, we've been talking about what NATO and these various European retards have been doing, mainly like Macron saying that they need to bomb Russia proper, send weapons from Ukraine, not just into the Donbass or Crimea, but into Moscow and St. Petersburg or whatever, pick a city that they would love to attack. And needless to say, this, of course, is considered, well, something worthy of being obliterated. Now, the problem is that not that Ukraine is saying they want to do this, that they're going to do this, it's that the West is providing them the weapons to do this and saying it's okay to do this, including the White House. Now, it doesn't really matter what Macron and the rest of these, Euro trash do. What the United States says and does is really the most important thing, because we, of course, are the number 2 nuclear power in the world after Russia. No, actually, Israel is number 3, and then China. But China will pass that up. And then, of course, there's North Korea and India and Pakistan, little countries like that. These are all very important little issues concerning the issue that we're talking about right now. Now, because the United States is so anxious to arm the enemies of Russia and so anxious to provide weapons that will eventually be used on Russian soil, we know they're actually happening right now. Now, obviously, there's a lot of countries I want to talk to, but it's hard to not go straight to the big elephant in the room, of course, and that is North Korea. The Russians, well, first of all, before I even talk about what the Russians, I just want to say that generally the world, the civilized world for the most part, was coerced into signing on to a deal, basically a treaty, which essentially said that North Korea had to give up their nuclear weapons in order to be treated like a normal country, not be embargoed upon and not allowed to have anything shipped into it, like food. Now, for whatever reason, China went along with this. And at one period of time, I believe it was in the 90s, when you had people like Gorbachev and that other idiot running things in Moscow, they were very liberal, and they allowed Russia to move in a direction which was against North Korea. But anyway, the bottom line is that because of these embargoes and because of the general world atmosphere and attitude towards North Korea, the people have been starving for whatever reason. You could say that the leaders are crazy, but either way, they have had no help. If they have bad growing season, they starve. China was signed onto this agreement. They wouldn't do anything. They couldn't. Now, Putin basically said, look, if you guys are going to arm our enemies and encourage our enemies to attack us and provide logistical support in that effort, then they reserve the right to do the same thing to us, namely arm our enemies. So basically what we're going to do, and I'm going to hopefully pull off, is we're going to take a list of all the enemies the United States has and look at what just happened just this week. We also want to look at how the Trumpers and the other, voters reacted. Well, let's see. Gosh, I want to talk about the Russian fleet, the super advanced nuclear submarine that sailed up our course, the coast of Florida, 140 kilometers away. I believe that thing had hypersonic cruise missiles on it. And that particular sub apparently was very problematic because it's so quiet, the Navy couldn't really keep track of where it was. And they made a protocol in Havana along with a very, very advanced frigate, which is more like a very, very advanced destroyer, but it's smaller. It's a frigate, but that thing is, I would say the most advanced frigate in the entire world right now. Admiral something or other, Gorbachev, I don't know, whatever. I'm not going to try to. But the bottom line is that sub cruising off the coast of Florida was a big FU. Well, Putin didn't go to Cuba. The Navy went to Cuba. But that was a signal because Putin couldn't go more than one place at once. But what he did go was North Korea and Vietnam. Now, there's lots of countries that are wanting to join BRICS, which is extremely important. And there's a lot of countries that are very significant. But before I talk about what Putin did, I should probably revisit the peace conference that happened in Lucerne, Switzerland. The so-called peace conference, which was basically put together by Ukraine and hosted by the female prime minister of Switzerland. Anyway, that was a complete and utter fiasco and a debacle, and nobody showed up. And it was basically an echo chamber, and everything they said there was the same thing everyone else was saying. It had no substance. There were no big players, no India, Russia, China, African countries, etc. You know who was there? Milei was there. Yeah. The one that wants to be part of that mafia really, really bad. You should have seen that guy. They had another one of these ridiculous things. You should, at the G7 conference, we talked about that a little bit last week, another big fiasco. The White House had to make a lot of, let's just say they had to answer a lot of questions at the press conference about why did Biden look like he was wandering off like a senile old man and struggling to figure out where he was. It actually happened. It's getting worse every day. So bad that they're talking about a little insurrection. Like Kamala. Kamala's saying, I'm president. Basically, Kamala is trying to bite at the bit a little bit too hard. And she's beginning to say, look, this guy is mentally out of it. I'm assuming the command. All right. And, of course, the Democrats are saying, whoa. We got to replace this Kamala woman with Hillary. But don't they know that the object is to get Getty's little adopted son, Gavin Newsom, in there. So ultimately that's the plan, but then it would be like me saying I told you so, which is what I do all the time. Anyway, so back to the world things. Basically, part of what happened here is that now the embargo against Castro regime, former Castro regime, the Cuban government, is now circumvented completely and entirely by Russia. Even the petroleum that they depended on that comes from Venezuela that they're getting in spotty deliveries, they don't have to worry about that anymore because they're going to get it from Russia. Russian ships will dock with everything they need. This means they're going to be able to upgrade their machine tools, they're going to be upgrading their infrastructure, the whole 9 yards. Putin said this. That's just Cuba. Cuba's going to be entering the 20th century now. They're going to be able to sell their 1950s vintage American. We'll be able to probably get those on the market maybe eventually, but yeah, they're going to be driving around fancy Chinese-made cars here very soon. Let's see what else. Do we go to Korea? Yeah, I suppose. We'll go to Korea first before Vietnam. Well, anyway, Korea was the prize state that didn't get anything and their people starved. And Russia came along, sat down with Kim Il-jung and said, okay, no more. Welcome to the multipolar world. You are now one of us. You're going to get everything you need. Everything you need. You need gas. You want to get rid of your coal plants and run gas. You got gas. You need food. You need fertilizer. You need farming equipment. You need whatever, you're going to now get it. Oh, and all those weapons you have, guess what? You're not going to have to depend on jet fighters that were made in the 50s or the 80s. We're going to hook you up with all the latest technologies, and of course, you're going to make them in-house. And don't worry, that includes the hypersonic cruise missiles, the hypersonic ICBM missiles, all that fun stuff. Oh, and as a bonus, no longer will you have to depend on using diesel power to generate electricities to get your subs running around so you can deliver your ICBMs. You're now going to get nuclear technology for your submarines. Isn't that wonderful? What does Russia get out of the deal? Well, Russia's economy is growing at about roughly 8% right now. It's booming. They can use some of that skilled labor over there in Korea. And you know what else they could use? The soldiers. You know what else they could use? The weapons. You know, here's one of the quickest things that is important, I suppose, the numbers, is that people say that Putin left North Korea before he went to Vietnam, but he left North Korea with a deal to basically have delivered to him 5 million rounds of 155 millimeter howitzer. Okay, the basic standard round, the one that everyone else is scouring the world trying to find these things. Now, 5 million rounds is a pretty decent amount because the United States and Europe all together can barely produce 2 million rounds a year, even if they boost everything. They boost their production 20%, whatever. Again, without saying that Russia's a war economy, you certainly know that North Korea is a war economy. That goes without saying. So Korea supposedly can produce something like 4 million of these shells every year. You know, right away, they make twice as many as the West. Why is that? Well, it's because for the last however many, 50, 60, whatever years, they've been planning to take on the entire firepower of the world, you know, the UN and all that. And eventually the entire strength of the West would be coming down on them. Kind of like it's supposedly coming down on Russia right now. Well, again, our enemies. Okay, so obviously these guys have nuclear bombs, nuclear technology, and they can produce massive amounts of these weapons that people need. So that's a big deal. You know, now here's another thing. South Korea had a deal with Russia here. This just kind of shows you what's going on with the politics in the area. But apparently Russia and South Korea were working together on a project to make surface-to-air missiles. Anti-flying thing missiles. And for this reason, they were building a pretty nice, healthy relationship. But unfortunately, a new president was elected in South Korea, and all that was tossed out. Kind of like the guy that took over in Argentina and tossed out the Argentina going to BRICS. Well, anyway, as a result of this, well, let's just put it this way, what ultimately ended up happening is the United States asked South Korea to loan it something like 5 million rounds. Maybe not 5 million, I don't remember what the actual number was, but it could have been more like 2 million probably. But they wanted the United States to quote-unquote, or Republic of South Korea, whatever it is, to quote-unquote loan 2 million 155 millimeter shells to the United States. Now, the excuse was that this was going to replenish the shells that the United States had emptied from its arsenal to give to Ukraine. It wasn't to be sent to Ukraine, but it was to just kind of restock the shelves after the shelves had been emptied and wasted on Ukraine. Well, obviously that was bullshit, because all of those 2 million shells went to Ukraine and were used to kill Russians. Now, before I go on, I want to share one more thing that I kind of been wanting to kind of share with you guys. I didn't really know the best way to do it, but because I really wanted accurate numbers. So I'm going to use numbers that are perhaps a little bit rounded, let's just say that. But I want to put things into perspective for you, okay? The losses of humans, the human life in Ukraine right now, this battle that's been going on since, well, whatever it is, however many months. I mean, obviously, for most people in Donbass, it's been going on since at least, 2012, 2014. But the point is, if you look at the number of soldiers killed, Ukraine, the numbers are ridiculous. I mean, they're dying so fast and so hard. There are probably at least 1 million people. They had a very, very large army for European standards. The Europeans built a very big army of the Slavic people that they wanted to use to fight against these other Slavic people. But most of these people are dead now. And, of course, they're trying to replenish it. I mean, they're using convicts right now, of course. They're trying to fill the trenches with people in jail. Killers, no training at all. Just release them and put them in the trenches. Now, the Russians have lost probably somewhere around 500,000 people, give or take. And you would think that this is a staggering number of dead citizens of any country. Staggering. In the United States, we have really, I don't think, ever experienced something of that staggering number. I mean, obviously, the Civil War was the most bloody war, and I think perhaps those numbers may come close. But for the most part, the losses of American troops in all of the world wars and the various other skirmishes, etc., war on drugs, war on terror. But if you look at the losses, say, in Vietnam, a struggle that took place for quite a few years. I don't know, remember what it was. It seems to me it was at least 25 years or more. I lived through that period of time and lived with that hanging over my head growing up, waiting to be sent off to it. It ended, thankfully, in 75, and I graduated in 76, so I kind of dodged that bullet, but it had a big effect on me. And Vietnam is one of those countries that Putin visited. I want to talk about Putin visiting this country, but, well, heck, things are different. Sorry, I lost my train of thought, but let's get back to Vietnam. Once again, I don't really see Vietnam as an enemy per se of the United States. I see them as a country that is almost as an alternative to China or Malaysia or some of these other countries as a center for growth with electronics, especially when you look at the potential for Taiwan to need to have to relocate a lot of its technology, just as the same way as a lot of American and European Western companies have relocated their Chinese manufacturing to Vietnam. They're relatively friendly, and if somebody was to ask me, I'd say, well, technically we lied to Ho Chi Minh, and technically the French should have never been allowed back in. But anyway, again, Putin went there. So much like the situation with Korea and North Korea and Castro and Vietnam, these guys are entering into a very, very, very important relationship. Who else could they arm that is an enemy of the United States? Well, let's see. Iran? Well, they're doing that for sure right now. Let's see who else. Syria? They're doing that for sure right now. Let's see who else. Venezuela? Probably. I'll be hearing about that here before too long. What else? Everybody else is signing the BRICS. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about the Middle East here real quick. Now, of course, Biden has supposedly been withholding, I think, 5,200, 2,000-pound shells. I think it was the 500 500-pound bombs. He was withholding a shipment of 500-pound bombs. Now, these are JDAMs, I believe, just big, heavy, high explosive bombs that fall down and destroy whole buildings, apartment buildings. Why would Biden do that? Well, probably because there's really no buildings left. There's nothing left. They're trying to get whatever's underground in the rubble, and they are, committing a genocide. And what's his name? Netanyahu's getting really upset about this. Well, they're losing. Now, I wanted to talk about how everybody's responding to this stuff, because ultimately, these are the guys we're dealing with. Okay? And that is the majority of the Americans, whatever you want to call them, the voters. There's two sides right now, so-called left and right. One of them is supporting Biden and Bolshevism and the war in Ukraine and craziness, and has crazy whatever. Let's just put it that way. They are the ones that we don't really talk about because we think they're the craziest. But then, of course, there's the Trumpers, which are at least half, and should be the people that are most disposed to listening to us. Now, unfortunately, because of this political game that we're having to work against, and for whatever reason, this stuff's still allowed on Twitter to fester, and yet we can't get our message out. But I ran across this one thing that was talking about the Russians being in the Caribbean, being off the coast of Florida. Now, of course, Cuba is in the Caribbean, so obviously, if you're going to sail to Cuba, there's a string of islands, the Bahamas and what have you, that you have to navigate around. Dominican Republic, Haiti, Jamaica, Puerto Rico, all these things, Guadalupe. Anyway, the point is, on these islands, some of these islands here, there's a bunch of celebrities that live there. They've got homes. Now, if you look at a map from the corner, if you say the top left corner is the tip of Florida, and then you go down diagonally, you're going to eventually reach the far western side of Venezuela. But between that, running relatively diagonally, are these Turks and Caicos and Bahamas and these islands in Cuba and Dominica and Haiti, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we know Epstein Island is there. And we know that all these guys have stuff like, what's his face, Biden. We know about the submarines. We know about Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, here's some insanity that I'm going to try to share with you, because it's related to all this stuff. But at the same time, when you see the level of stupid here, you kind of realize what we're up against, clearly. And what is it? Here's a little map or a little picture, and it shows going, say, from the northwest down to the, down to the southeast, which starts out with Eddie Murphy. He's got a private island in the Bahamas. Then we got Johnny Depp right next to him, a private island in the Bahamas. Then there's another guy right below that. These are, right relatively close to Florida, just off the coast of Cuba. David Copperfield, private island in the Bahamas. Then who else do we got? Let's see, Turks and Caicos. We've got Keith Richards. He has a mansion, along with Bruce Willis, also has a mansion in Turks and Caicos. So if we keep going down, past Dominican Republic, just a little bit past Puerto Rico, we get to Richard Branson's private island. Now, we know Richard Branson, of course, is tied in with the whole submarine nonsense and smuggling children and Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein. Who's he neighbors with? Who's right closest to him? In fact, closer than Keith Richards and Bruce Willis would be none other than Donald Trump. He has a mansion in St. Martin, and here's a little island just right next to Donald Trump's, owned by Roman Abramovich. We're going to talk about Roman Abramovich. And his mansion is in St. Bart's, Guadalupe. And then just a little bit southeast of Roman is Oprah Winfrey. She's on Antigua. And then, of course, a little bit south, you get down to Mystique. You've got Mick Jagger. Those are just some of the celebrities. But I want to focus on the proximity of Donald Trump and Roman Abramovich and even Richard Branson and Oprah, for that matter. Now, the funny part is I was looking at one of these pages, I guess you could call it, of a person that Twitter was recommending that I might be interested in. I guess it's because when you're either going to get one side of the coin, you're going to get the other. You get pro-Trump or pro-Biden. This is the flavors that they're offering: vanilla and chocolate, or worse, vanilla and strawberry. Well, anyway, okay. So this woman had reposted this thing, and here this comes from a guy with a name. He's got a flying saucer and says Val Thor. Now, Val Thor is a mythical character who is basically a big, tall, six-fingered alien who came to the United States with the secret space force and basically consults with the military and all this sort of thing. It's quite the story. Whether or not this guy's real, obviously this guy's not Val Thor, but he's got a little subheading, his whatever's at Commander Val Thor, CMDR Val, VALTHOR, Val Thor. All right, this is what Val Thor says is going on. This is why he posted this thing. He says, Russian submarines. Now, I want you to, I'm sorry, but I want you to listen to the, how shall I say, the punctuation and the poor grammar. Here we go. Russian submarines are clean out Caribbean underground, ... Finally, military is showing you their operations, ! And this is the funny part. Important fact first, semicolon. This is all in caps. Donald Trump was not part of the satanic cult, ... He went and is going after them. What is this? A semicolon, and it's a little wink emoji. And then, of course, this is where it really deteriorates. I don't even want to. It just shows you that the word retarded keeps coming to me. I know some people say I should stop using the word, but I'm owning it. Okay, so seriously, the retardation does apply. This, especially to people that suck this shit up. Obviously, the source is retarded, but they do this on purpose. They think it sounds cryptic. Retarded is the new cryptic. So it says, you are new in the topic Epstein and Epstein Island, ? Well, small letters. This is Necker Island. Richard, space, the Virgin billionaire, misspelling while, Epstein had the B VIPs as Hollywood and other entertainment muppets, Branson took care about the A VIPs. Okay, let's see. And then he goes on, at home with Richard Branson on Necker Island. I guess that was supposed to be a link. He says, who owns all these islands? What really happens there? Why is that important? Terramar, tunnel systems. Terramar was not tunnels, it was submarines. Not everyone is involved. Not everyone is involved, but many are, very a lot. And then capitals in parentheses, horrible, disturbing, pure evil. Richard Branson and the real Pirates of the Caribbean. Now, and then it goes on and on. It's just with the usual. Let's see. Epstein / child sex trafficking king. Tip of the eye. Oh, here we go. Protect the children. Save our children. Save our children. Okay, right away we know what that bullshit is. Okay? Those are the, well, whatever you want to call it, the slogans of our enemy. Just the tip of the iceberg. They're not giving you the tip. Okay, back to what's obvious here. Again, Remember what they said here. Very important. First thing, important fact first. Donald Trump was not part of the satanic cult. Wink, wink. And he went and is going after them. Oh, he went and he still is? He went after them when he was in office, and he still is when not being office? Is that it? Okay, well, okay, fine. Let's talk about Roman Abramovich, his nearby neighbor. Now, bear in mind, Roman has a big, huge yacht, probably more than one. He's one of these guys that sails back and forth from Britain, the Mediterranean, to these islands. It goes back and forth. And for him, Donald Trump is right there. He's right there. He's barely a little boop 5-minute boat ride on his big ass yacht to park where Donald Trump is over there on St. Martin. This is how these people get around. They don't all have to be on Epstein's flight log. When he says B-list and A-list, well, that's kind of right. The B-list have to go on these planes and get their names on flight logs. The A-list, they've got their own yachts. They own these homes. They go back and forth. The guys that really got it going have got submarines. The guys that have really got it going have yachts with submarines. I know this because I've seen them. Well, anyway, Donald Trump. What's his connection to Roman Abramovich and the rest of them? Let's look at Roman Abramovich. What can we see about these guys? Here's a little thing. Let's see, who put this out? This is this is the New York Times. Now, this little piece, this is a puff piece. And I want to give you this because it gives you an idea of what's really happening right now with Ukraine, the significance, and why this is fucking over the mafia and who the mafia is, which you should consider when you consider how close this guy is to Donald Trump's little island right there. All right, what do they say? They say, okay, this is very dramatic. He says, as Russian troops massed near the border with Ukraine last month, this is in 2022, the American ambassador to Israel received an appeal on behalf of Roman Abramovich, the most visible of the billionaires linked to President Vladimir Putin. Leaders of cultural, educational, and medical institutions, along with a chief rabbi, had sent a letter urging the United States not to impose sanctions on the Russians. A major donor, saying it would hurt Israel and the Jewish world. So in other words, they're talking about don't put a sanction on Roman here. I think that's what they're suggesting. Days later, Mr. Abramovich and Yad Vashem, at the Holocaust Memorial, announced a partnership that the spokesman for the organization included a pledge of at least $10 million. Okay, so I guess that means that Mr. Roman gave him $10 million. Sorry for my reading. The request of the diplomat reflects the extraordinary effort Mr. Abramovich, 55, has made over the past 2 decades to parlay his Russian fortune into elite standing in the West, buying London's Chelsea soccer team, acquiring luxury homes in New York, London, Tel Aviv, St. Bart's, Aspirin, collecting modern masterworks, and contributing to art institutions around the world. With 2 super yachts, multiple Ferrari, Porsche, Aston Martin, and a private 787 Boeing Dreamliner, Mr. Abramovich wanted everyone to know that he had arrived. Now the backlash against the Russian invasion of Ukraine has tarnished that status, and he and other oligarchs have spent much to reach out. Let's see, what is it? British authorities added him to an ever-expanding list of Russians under sanctions. So let's see, his fortune, estimated at more than $13 billion, was barred from entering Britain or doing any business. All right, let me just put it this way. I'm cutting to the chase before I read this entire thing about him, because there's other stuff I want to share with you. Is that he's not the only one. There's like 1,000 of these guys. a good 1,000 of these guys. And they all have one thing in common. They're Chabad Jew. And their money, their billions that they fleeced from the fall of the Soviet Union, when all that wealth was liquidated for pennies on the dollar, kopecks on the ruble, they made a bunch of really rich Chabad Jewish oligarchs. And these guys were the ones that Putin embraced. He got them really close. He made their little cult the number one facet of the Jews in Russia, which is a significant thing. And these guys basically built up their mafia all over the world, and their whatever it was they're using, their base of operations in Kiev, in Ukraine. Now this is Khazar territory, so it almost looked like these guys were running it. They're running Khazaria. They were getting it back, and Putin was helping them do it. But no, Putin went against the plan and did this. Now, I would say that his plan all along was to cozy up to these guys and then, boom, take their money, which is what's happening right now. But the thing is that the West is taking the money. The West is confiscating these assets from these oligarchs, which is funny because now the machine that is this Khazarian mafia doesn't have the funds that it was getting from these oligarchs. It's amazing. It's amazing. The irony of this all. Well, back to the issue. Before this Ukraine thing got really bad, and we had to taunt and all that sort of thing, things changed. Putin came along, Donald Trump came along, various different things. And I don't want people to think that Donald Trump is really innocent of this stuff. He's not. I mean, if we had to go back to talking about Abramovich, you'd say, well, okay, what did Trump have to do with Abramovich? Well, there's a whole bunch of these oligarchs that had very close, intimate dealings with Donald Trump in many projects that were, of course, wrong. If you want to know more about that, you'll have to go get my series I did on Felix Sater, aka Moshe Bond. That's about 3.5 hours of listing these oligarchs. But we could say, for one thing is for sure, is that Abramovich paid for Jared and Ivanka Trump to spend 4 days in Russia with his family. So, nothing shady about that at all, I'm sure. But you also have to remember, these guys have these boats. So this guy was just across the water, just a little bit, within sight. His island was in sight of Donald Trump's property, probably. They cruise together, they hang out. They all go to the same parties. This concept of, well, let's just go back to this business with this, what is it, Valiant Thor, whatever bullshit. Can you believe it? They're saying a nuclear submarine designed for stealth, sailing underwater and shooting hypersonic cruise missiles capable of destroying some massive amounts of life in the United States. That somehow this was involved in an operation to clear out bunkers, tunnels, a tunnel system, suggesting that this tunnel system went from the tip of Florida down to the corner there of Venezuela and linked up all these islands. At the very least, Richard Branson and Oprah and Abramovich, but not Donald Trump. No. He was fighting it. He was and is fighting it. He didn't stop. You seen the guy lately? He didn't stop. Now, I heard today that Donald Trump has made a campaign stop. I'm not sure where this was, if it was close to me or what, but it was one of his stops. Could have been Minnesota, I'm not sure. But supposedly at this particular event, the human trafficking issue came up. And he is being portrayed. At least the pundits are trying to suggest that he's going to reemerge as a champion of ending human trafficking. Of course, I find this extremely funny. Kind of like this business with Allie Carter. And I don't care when she said it, but she basically said it's not up to one group, one man, one hero. I'm paraphrasing slightly. But it's up to all of us. And then there's all kinds of words like courage and stand up and be counted and all this bullshit. But not one word about the Getty and the plan and how we can end this thing. So I want to just basically tell you that the situation with the United States is not too good right now. Okay, it's almost suicidal what they're planning on doing. And you have to remember that we know who the enemy is. And it's the same enemy that wants to go in these bunkers, and it's the same enemy that wants us all to die, and I guess they'd rather it be a North Korean nuke or a Russian nuke or a tidal wave or whatever, because they don't care, they're going to be in their bunkers. Well, again, we have to double our efforts. We have to recognize that these people are retarded and move on and make as much noise as you can. I got to be honest with you. At this point, I don't care if I look like a bully and I look like a monster, because we're fighting monsters and the enemy needs to know what they're up against. And if anything, whatever it takes to get the publicity, whatever it takes to get my name out there, whatever it takes to get the Getty mission out there is important. Now, obviously, and I'm waiting for this, somebody to do something stupid, especially at the Getty or whatever, or some false flag situation where somebody does something violent and says it was because they were under the direction of this movement. I'm surprised the enemy hasn't pulled that stunt yet. Probably because even if it was completely negative, the end result would probably be really bad for them, because they know any way they play this in their crystal ball, their Ouija board, whatever, it comes up the same. There is no way out of billions and billions of ultimate possibilities that this thing is not going to end them, and they already know it. It's written in stone. And this is why it's so important for them to kill as many of us and get into their bunkers as quick as possible. So, again, it's up to you to stop it. Allie's army, my ass. It's the Jedi doing the work. Okay? Fuck all these Satanists. This is war. You don't have time. We're getting extremely close to World War III, and we know that Trump himself is a Chabad Jew. He's no different than these Phoenicians that are trying to start this war right now with Putin. Putin's not fucking around anymore. He's going straight to our enemies and say, that's it, we're on. Welcome to our club. We like your army. We like your soldiers. They're starving, malnourished, no problem. You're going to be getting plenty of food now. And your soldiers are not going to have those issues, and they're going to be strong, and everything that you've got is going to be upgraded with new technology. The United States can't even beat Yemen. We can't beat Korea. We couldn't beat Vietnam. We can't beat Venezuela. Shall I go on? You know, the head of the Hezbollah over there in Lebanon basically told Cyprus, the island just to the west, said, if there are any attacks on their territory coming from Cyprus, meaning NATO or Israeli craft, that they would target the seaside, beautiful area of Cyprus, the Greek side, I assume, not the Turkish side, and destroy it with missiles. Now, that's the thing. The Gerald R. Ford is cruising into the Mediterranean once again with its support group, and it is supposedly to stop Israel from attacking Lebanon, which is obviously bullshit. It's trying to stop Iran or Syria or someone else from getting involved when Israel is attacking Lebanon. Now, of course, Lebanon has been shooting quite a bit of firepower into northern Israel, and they have quite a bit of firepower, and they have even more stockpiled, which is the name of the game here. We don't have that. The West doesn't have that. Israel doesn't have that. Ukraine doesn't have that. North Korea has it. Vietnam has it. Well, Russia has it. China has it. It's not looking really good for us. Okay? We're no longer a friend. We're no longer a partner. We're no longer a colleague. We're no longer even an opponent. A little while there, we were considered an opponent. We've gone from opponent to enemy. Russia considers the United States its enemy. This is an extremely dangerous place to be, and this is why he made a military and economic agreement with North Korea, an extreme nuclear threat. Okay? So, we're reaping what we sowed, and of course it's intended to be suicidal, and there's nothing we can do about that but occupy the Getty and do it soon, because Trump isn't going to fucking do it, okay? I'm going to do it. And I need your help. All right, if you want to support me economically, you got to use the PayPal, which of course is StephenKelly714@yahoo.com, okay? It's got to be friend or family, and I appreciate everything. If you want my book, if you want to contact me in any way, otherwise, you got to send me an email to law17gun@aol.com. And please push the Twitter and join my Telegram group, which is OccupytheGetty / Stephen E. Kelly. And work ever harder and do what you can, okay? All right, I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you guys all next week. And I want to send out a special thank you and a note of appreciation to all of you that are listening live and listening at all, okay? And the people that tune in, listen to it a second time, even if you're listening to this as a recording, which I am recording, yeah. I appreciate you, okay? And help me spread it. Set your own pages up and get this out there, okay? I've been thinking how much I wish I was on YouTube. Nope. It'd be nice if I was, right? Nope, can't do it. You do it for me, okay? All right, everyone. Thank you so much. I love you all. Good night. God bless. Adios. And goodbye.